You know, story playing has such an important part to play in children understanding what the Mass is all about. The big stories come to mind immediately, of course. Introducing the children, for example, to the great stories of Holy Week, of the Last Supper. This can be done as may be by parents as best as possible. Of course, with the salt materials, we have all of these materials that bring it all to life, bring the actual passages to life, the stories, which are more than just stories. They are events told to the children, storytelling in that way. So there are things like that. There's the great story of the disciples on their way to Emmaus, and the encounter that they had with a mysterious person that was Christ, and that led to a Mass happening in their own place of dwelling at Emmaus, and their return to by night back to Jerusalem to share what they had experienced. These are very exciting and moving events and stories. Now, when the children are using, for example, the Mass kit, when they're being introduced to it, as they're being introduced to it, the teacher's not going to digress, or the parent, into all these other stories. But if those stories have been woven into the experiences of the child, when they are using the materials, assembling the Mass kit, putting it together, reflecting on the little missal, the little lectionary that contains those stories, when they open the tabernacle that is lockable, and inside it they find a ciborium made of sturdy metal materials, and they look inside and they see the little host that is in there. These stories weave in to that experience, and they're remembering the encounter at Emmaus or the Last Supper. So what goes on in a child's mind, or even our own minds as a parent and a grandparent, while using the materials, becomes very rich. Something that you can't put into few words, because there could be so many things that occur while they're using those materials. Other impacts, for example, children that can be very distracted in the Mass when they're quite young. But once they've been exposed to this kind of material, a difference occurs when they are attentive. They don't need to be kind of entertained on the pews, because they're more focused at that moment on what's actually happening. And in their childlike way, yes, sometimes with distractions, but they're caught up. They're looking at the priest saying, oh, now he's going to do this. I remember a child when she was working with the Mass materials, and she was not only the Mass materials, but something that I call the parts of the Mass in detail, where we have actually a kind of a larger chalice into which they can pour wine, if they were allowed, and a drop of water. And as she's doing that, you could hear her thinking, and she actually verbalized it. When I pour in the water, we become one thing. It's like us becoming one thing with God. The wine mixed with a little bit of water. You know, so many things that can occur to children as they're using the materials. Even if they're looking at the vestments, which is another episode to talk about, I suppose, but even the shape, the actual things that the priest wears at Mass is resonant of what was worn back in the day when they travelled, when they moved. The cloak has become the chasuble, you know, and the alb, the undergarment of the cincture, is something that they probably wore too. Lots of thoughts can occur. They could be more or less accurate, but everything that happens in the Mass has a tremendous history to it, and every item in the Mass can be linked to a story one way or another.